It's funny, really, how we think we know something until we're forced to face the truth. Most people would say working the night shift at a hospital is just another job. It's routine, right? Patients, staff, nurses, just the usual. You clock in, do your rounds, and wait for morning to come. But trust me, there's nothing ordinary about the night shift at this hospital. No matter how hard I try to convince myself it's just a job like any other, I know better. I've seen things, heard things. Things I can't unsee, no matter how much I try. And it's all because of the rules. The rules. You can't break them. Not even once. Let me tell you why. I started working here about 6 months ago. The pay was good, better than I expected. And the shift, well, it wasn't so bad. I'd worked at a few smaller clinics before, but there was something about this place. Something unsettling. The hospital was old. An ancient building worn down by time, with long hallways that seemed to stretch forever. I worked in the ER, handling the night shift alone, with just a skeleton crew of nurses and a couple of doctors on rotation. Most of the time it was quiet. Too quiet. But there were rules. Rules I didn't know about at first. It started with rule number 1. Never, under any circumstances, go into the basement. First I thought it was just some odd protocol. Maybe there were dangerous chemicals or equipment down there. Maybe it was just to avoid disturbing storage areas. I shrugged it off. There was no reason for me to go down there anyway. That was until I had to. It was a slow night, barely any patients. I was sitting at the nurse's station when a call came through. One of the doctors asked me to check on a specific patient in the basement. It wasn't uncommon to have patients down there, especially those in critical condition, in isolation rooms. The air felt thicker as I descended the stairs, the low hum of the overhead lights buzzing in my ears. The basement was cold, colder than the rest of the building. It smelled of mildew, and the air was damp. As I walked, I felt an odd weight pressing down on me, as if something was watching me from the shadows. I shook it off. It was probably nothing. But that's when I saw it. A figure standing at the far end of the hallway. At first I thought it was a nurse or another staff member. But the closer I got, the more wrong it felt. It was tall, too tall. Its back was hunched, and it seemed to be staring at the wall, unmoving. Stop. The hairs on my neck stood up. There was something unnatural about the way it stood there, its presence radiating an unexplainable sense of dread. I wanted to turn around and run, but something kept me frozen in place. I should have followed the rules. I should have turned back. But curiosity got the best of me. I took a step closer, and then it turned. Its face was twisted, distorted. Its eyes were black. No whites, just endless darkness staring back at me. Its mouth opened, and I swear I heard it whisper something, softly like a broken, strangled breath. I don't know what it said. But whatever it was, I ran. I ran so fast I thought my heart would explode. The next day I tried to forget it. Just another night shift, right? But the look on the other nurses' faces when I mentioned the basement. That's when I learned about the rule. The one I should have never broken. The hospital had a long-standing reputation, not just for its high standard of care, but for something else. Something that staff rarely talked about, especially at night. Rule number 2. Never speak to the patients who don't make noise. First, I thought it was just a safety protocol. Some patients, especially those who were heavily sedated or in critical condition, couldn't speak. It was probably just to avoid awkward situations, I thought. But the first time I encountered one of them, I realized how wrong I was. It was late, well past midnight, and I was checking on a comatose patient in room 312. The door creaked as I pushed it open. The patient, an elderly man, lay in bed, connected to various machines. He was breathing shallowly, but his eyes were wide open and staring directly at me. Froze. His eyes weren't just open. They were wide. Too wide. I had the distinct feeling that he was watching me, following my every movement. I swallowed hard, feeling my palms begin to sweat. I moved closer. "Mr. Wheeler," I whispered, unsure why I was speaking. He didn't respond. I figured he was heavily sedated. His pupils dilated from the drugs. But his gaze never left me. That's when I saw it. A faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. It was subtle, almost imperceptible. I thought my heart stopped. I should have backed away. I should have left the room. But I couldn't. Something was pulling me in. The smile grew. And then he whispered, "Get out, now." I stumbled backward, but before I could turn, the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. The lights flickered, and the room became impossibly cold. I could hear my own breath echo in the sudden stillness. I stood there, frozen, heart racing. And then the machine started beeping, erratically, loud, piercing beeps that seemed to rattle my bones. I ran out of that room faster than I've ever run in my life. And I didn't stop until I was back in the safety of the nurses' station. The staff never mentioned the patients who don't make noise. But I knew deep down that I had just encountered one of them. And the last thing I heard, it wasn't the beeping machines. It was the soft, guttural laugh coming from room 312. By now I had learned to follow the rules. I had no choice. But rule number 3 was the one that really set me on edge. It was simple. Too simple, really. Rule number 3. Never, ever look behind you after midnight. Seemed absurd at first, like some kind of superstition. But when you work the night shift long enough, you start to notice things. Things you can't explain. Like shadows moving when there's no one there. I remember the first time I truly understood why this rule existed. It was nearing 2 a.m. I was walking down one of the long corridors, checking on patients. The hospital was dead silent, save for the soft hum of the fluorescent lights above. I had just passed a door when I felt the unmistakable sensation of eyes on the back of my neck. Stop. The hair on my arms stood up, and I felt a chill creep down my spine. I turned my head slowly, cautiously. Nothing. The hallway was empty, just like it had been moments before. But that's when I saw something out of the corner of my eye. A figure, pale, almost translucent, standing just beyond the shadow of the hallway. It was tall, too tall. Its arms were too long. And its face, well, its face was nothing. No features. Just smooth, pale skin where its eyes, nose, and mouth should have been. I turned around and ran. This time I didn't look back. I didn't dare. By now, the rules had become a part of my existence. I followed them without question, even when they didn't make sense. But the final rule, the one I was never told, was the most terrifying of them all. It was a rule I discovered too late. You never leave the hospital after midnight. And by the time I realized the truth, it was already too late. You can laugh. You can call me paranoid. But I've seen things in that hospital that I can't explain. I've broken the rules and I've paid the price. Now every time I walk those hallways I feel something following me, watching me, waiting. And the thing is, I'm not sure if I'll ever leave. But I have to. Because I can't take another night shift. Not here. Not anymore. If you ever work at a hospital, especially at night, remember the rules. Because breaking them, that's when the real terror begins.